Before the story begins, for those who haven't subscribed to the Sahabat Sarita Mommy channel, please subscribe, and for those who have, don't forget to check in the comments section. Thank you. The air that night felt quite cold, but Clara was still busy grappling with stacks of folders and notes on her desk. The wall clock in her room already showed 10 p.m. Tomorrow was a big day for her husband's family. Jessica, her sister-in-law, was going to have a lavish wedding reception at one of the most prestigious event halls in the city. Clara re-examined the proof of transfer slips scattered across her desk. There was a receipt for the final payment for a catering service with a seafood menu that cost tens of thousands of dollars. There was also a receipt for the venue rental fee, with a capacity for 1,000 guests. Finally, Clara held the receipt for the payment of imported flower decorations and a custom wedding stage, the price of which reached $50,000. All these huge expenses were paid using money from Clara's personal account. Michael, her husband, always reasoned that his salary was being diverted for company needs and promised to pay her back later. Clara knew that promise would never be kept. Michael always had various excuses to run from financial responsibility. But to maintain peace in the household and avoid long arguments, Clara chose to give in. She spent the money from her own hard work as a project lead at the company where she worked. Clara stretched her neck muscles, which felt stiff. She stood up and walked slowly towards the wardrobe. A silk maroon gown was hanging neatly there. She had custom-ordered that gown 2 months ago to match the color theme of Eleanor's family. Clara smiled faintly looking at the gown. She hoped her appearance tomorrow could soften her mother-in-law's heart a little. All this time, Eleanor had always been cold, and often threw sharp, sarcastic remarks at her. Her mother-in-law always considered Clara a wife who didn't take care of her husband because she was too busy with work. But the reality was that Clara had to work hard day and night to cover the lifestyle of Michael's family, which demanded everything to be luxurious and high class. A loud vibration from the cell phone on the bed shattered Clara's daydream. She turned and saw her phone screen lit up brightly in the rather dim room. There was an incoming message from Michael. Michael wasn't coming home tonight. Her husband chose to stay at Eleanor's house, reasoning that he wanted to gather with the extended family before Jessica's wedding tomorrow morning. Clara understood that and chose to stay home to finish her remaining office work and organize the vendor payment documents. Clara picked up her cell phone. She opened Michael's message with a calm feeling. But that calmness was instantly shattered when she read the string of sentences on the screen. Her eyes were fixed on word after word typed by her husband. Change of plans. My mom doesn't want you to come. Only the core family will be there. Clara read the message over and over. She made sure she wasn't seeing things or misunderstanding the context of the sentence. But the sentence was very clear and firm. No pleasantries, no apology. Michael sent that message the day before his sister-in-law's wedding. A grand event, the majority of which was funded by Clara's own sweat and tears. A feeling of tightness immediately hit Clara's chest. The air in the spacious room suddenly felt like it vanished, making it hard for her to breathe. Clara's hand trembled violently as she typed on her phone screen. She replied to Michael's message quickly. She asked what he meant by the message, and why the decision had suddenly and unilaterally changed so drastically. Michael was online. It didn't take long for Michael to reply to her message. Mom feels your presence isn't important. This is our family's event. You're not core family. Don't make a scene and just do as Mom wishes. You just stay home tomorrow. Michael's reply felt like a hard slap across Clara's face. She placed her phone on the bed with a slow motion. Her body felt limp, devoid of energy. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring straight at the bedroom wall. Core family. Those 2 words kept spinning in her head. For the 5 years she had been married to Michael, Clara had always tried so hard to be part of their family. She ignored all the harsh treatment and belittling words from Eleanor. She turned a blind eye when Jessica often asked for money without ever returning it. She let Michael lie to his family by saying that all the luxury they enjoyed was the result of Michael's success at work. Clara stared intently at the stack of receipts on her desk. $50,000 just for the venue's decoration. Not including the gourmet catering and luxurious party favors distributed to the guests. Everything was paid in full using money from her savings. And now, after all those facilities were ready to be enjoyed, she was just cast aside. She was forbidden from attending the event she funded because she was considered not core family. Michael didn't even try to defend her one bit in front of Eleanor. Her husband instead joined in, subtly kicking her out to maintain his image and indulge his mother's selfishness. Tears slowly trickled down Clara's cheeks. She wiped the tears with the back of her hand. She took a deep breath and exhaled forcefully. There were no more tears of sadness. The pain in her heart now turned into a very rational anger. She realized her foolishness all this time. She had allowed herself to be thoroughly exploited by selfish people who knew no gratitude. Clara stood up. She walked towards the closet and stared at her maroon gown. With a swift and unhesitating motion, she pulled the gown off its hanger and dropped it to the floor. She would never wear that dress. She would never go to that party. Michael and his family wanted a party attended only by the core family without Clara's presence. Clara decided to grant their wish, but she also had the right to take back everything that did not belong to that family. Clara walked back to her desk. Her eyes stared sharply at the receipt for the full payment of the decoration from a leading vendor in the city. She picked up the receipt and read the name and contact number of the vendor's person in charge listed there. The decoration contract was clearly written in Clara's name. Clara had full legal control over the order. Clara picked up her cell phone again. She opened her contacts and looked for the number of the real estate agent who had contacted her a few months ago to ask if her luxurious house was for sale. The house she currently lived in with Michael was a house she had bought long before she knew her husband. The title deed of the house was purely in Clara's name. All this time, Michael had always acted as if he were the master of the house. And Eleanor often came over, acting like a queen who must be served. Tonight, Clara promised herself that her husband's family's charade had to end. If they considered her an outsider, then she would act like an outsider. An outsider who would take back all her assets until there was nothing left for that family. Clara sat up straight in her desk chair and began to dial a number on her cell phone screen to start her reckoning. Clara stared at the contact number on her cell phone screen. The contact's name was Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling was the managing director of the prominent decoration vendor Clara had hired for her sister-in-law's wedding tomorrow morning. The wall clock showed 11 p.m. Clara knew Mr. Sterling and his team must be at the event hall right now. They would be busy putting the finishing touches on the magnificent event. Without hesitation, Clara pressed the call button. The call connected on the third ring. Mr. Sterling's voice sounded a bit noisy from the other end. There was the sound of workers' instructions and the footsteps of busy people in the background. Mr. Sterling greeted Clara politely and respectfully. He reported that the wedding stage was perfectly set up. The arrangements of imported white lilies and pink roses were also neatly placed along the aisle to the main entrance. Mr. Sterling assured her that everything was according to the $50,000 order that Clara had paid in full last week. Clara listened to Mr. Sterling's report with a flat facial expression. She imagined how luxurious the hall must be now. She could also imagine how proud Eleanor would be, showing off that luxury to her invited guests tomorrow. But Clara would not let that happen. She took a short breath and delivered her instructions in a very calm and firm tone. Clara asked Mr. Sterling to dismantle all the decorations that had been installed, effective immediately. Mr. Sterling was silent for a long time on the other end of the line. The background noise seemed to stop for a moment. He asked cautiously if he had misheard Clara's instruction. He reminded Clara that the wedding was set to begin in less than 12 hours. Mr. Sterling also explained that a sudden dismantling of the decorations would ruin the entire event plan. Clara responded in a louder, more commanding voice. She insisted that Mr. Sterling had not misheard at all. Clara was his official client. The decoration rental agreement was signed directly by Clara. All the payment money was also transferred in full from Clara's personal account. Clara had absolute rights over the order. Clara told Mr. Sterling that she was canceling her order for tomorrow's event. She stated bluntly that she would not allow the items she rented to be used by Michael's family. Clara ordered Mr. Sterling to retrieve all the stage props, flowers, crystal chandeliers, and guest chairs before sunrise. Clara even said Mr. Sterling could keep the $50,000 payment as compensation for his team's hard work tonight. There was only one condition: the hall had to be completely empty again by morning. Mr. Sterling tried to argue against it. He felt this was highly unusual and violated his company's ethics. However, Clara cut him off quickly. She reminded him that if he allowed the property to remain installed and be used by Michael's family tomorrow, Clara would sue his company. The reason would be that his company was leasing facilities under Clara's name to another party without official permission. That logical legal threat made Mr. Sterling finally give in. He agreed to Clara's request with a tone of resignation. Mr. Sterling promised to deploy all his workers to transport all the decorations back into the trucks that very night. The call ended abruptly. Clara placed her phone on her desk. One major task was done. Clara's heart felt no regret at all. Instead, she felt very satisfied and relieved. The decision to cancel the decorations was the right first step to reclaim her self-respect, which had been trampled on by Michael and her mother-in-law for so long. Clara got up from her chair and walked towards the large wardrobe in the corner of her room. She pulled out a medium-sized suitcase. She had to leave this house tonight. She didn't want to see Michael's or Eleanor's face ever again. Clara began to pack her personal belongings with swift movements. She only took her work clothes, a few casual outfits, and her favorite shoes. She left all the jewelry Michael had given her on the vanity table. She also left behind the designer bags Michael had bought using a credit card whose bills were always paid by Clara every month. Clara refused to take a single item related to that liar. Clara's main focus now was to secure her important documents. She opened a small safe hidden behind a wall painting. She took out her passport, diplomas, insurance documents, and most importantly, the original title deed to this luxurious house. This house she lived in with Michael was the result of Clara's hard work for years before she even met him. The title was purely in Clara's name alone. She would not let Michael and Eleanor continue to enjoy the comfort of sleeping in this house, while they treated Clara like a worthless outcast. While putting the stack of documents into a waterproof protective bag, Clara remembered all of Eleanor's insults over the past 5 years. Her mother-in-law always boasted about Michael's greatness in front of their extended family. Eleanor often told stories loudly that this luxurious house was bought by Michael. Michael himself always remained silent and smiled falsely, affirming his mother's lies. Clara used to choose to stay silent and be patient to protect her husband's dignity. She thought her sacrifice and silence would be appreciated over time. It turned out her judgment was completely wrong. Her kindness was instead seen as a weakness to be exploited. Clara's suitcase was full and zipped up tight. She locked the suitcase zipper firmly. She looked around the spacious master bedroom one last time. The large bed where she often cried over her fate now looked very neat. Her desk was clear of any remaining documents. Clara had made up her mind completely. She would cut all ties with Michael's family. Without exception. Clara grabbed her car keys from a small drawer. She left the room and walked down the quiet hallway of the house. There wasn't a hint of sadness as she closed the main door from the outside. She turned the key in the lock with a firm click. Clara walked to the garage, lifted her suitcase into the trunk of her car, and started the engine. Clara stared at the grand house from behind her car's window with a sharp gaze. Tomorrow morning, this house would have a new owner. So would the wedding hall that was now being completely dismantled by Mr. Sterling's workers. Clara pressed the gas pedal firmly. Her car moved slowly out of the yard, driving through the quiet city streets towards a new chapter of her life. Clara's car drove at a moderate speed through the deserted city streets. Her main destination tonight was not a hotel or a motel, but a coffee shop that was open 24/7. During the drive, Clara connected her cell phone to the car's audio system. She speed-dialed David's number. David was a senior real estate agent she had known for a long time and trusted completely with her assets. A few months ago, David had informed her that a businessman named Mr. Chen was very interested in buying Clara's house at a high price with a cash payment scheme. At that time, Clara had firmly rejected it because she was still thinking of preserving her marriage with Michael. But tonight, the situation had changed completely. The call connected. David's voice sounded a bit hoarse as he had just woken up. Clara immediately stated her intentions with a concise and clear sentence. Clara asked David to meet her at the downtown coffee shop right away. Clara stated that she agreed to sell her house to Mr. Chen that very night. David was very surprised to hear the sudden decision. He reminded Clara that it was already past midnight and the notary's office was closed. However, Clara urged David firmly. Clara said it was an emergency and she was willing to give him a double commission if David could bring the initial purchase agreement documents tonight. Hearing the offer of a large commission from his main client, David immediately agreed to Clara's request and quickly prepared to head to the meeting location. 20 minutes later, Clara arrived at the coffee shop's parking lot. She got out of the car carrying a bag containing important documents and the original title deed of her house. She walked in and chose a table in a quiet corner of the room, far from the entrance. Not long after, David arrived carrying a briefcase containing folders, documents, and a laptop. David sat in front of Clara with a face that still held many questions. David asked, "Is Clara facing a big problem that requires selling the house so suddenly in the middle of the night?" Clara looked at David sharply. Clara answered briefly that she just wanted to leave this city immediately and cut off all her past affairs. Clara asked David to focus on the home sale transaction process without need. And diverty Chen, the prospective buyer, Mr. Chen turned out to be still awake as he was finishing up some work. David explained the current situation. The homeowner agreed to sell the property tonight if Mr. Seed Chen could pay a large down payment as a legally binding earnest money deposit. Mr. Chen, who had long been interested in the luxurious house in a prime location, agreed immediately without much thought. Mr. Chen Azaler and his ones. Chen asked for 15 minutes to coordinate with his private bank regarding the large fund transfer at night. While waiting for the process from Mr. Chen's side, David took out the binding purchase agreement documents from his bag. He filled in the necessary data quickly and carefully. Clara handed over the original title deed of her house along with a copy of her ID to David to be cross-checked. Clara read every clause in the agreement very carefully. She made sure there were no legal loopholes that could harm her later. David explained that after the down payment was received tonight, Mr. Chen would pay the remaining balance the next afternoon after the banks were operating normally. Clara agreed to the payment scheme as it was advantageous for her. David's cell phone rang again. Mr. Chen confirmed that the earnest money of $200,000 had been successfully transferred to Clara's personal account. Clara immediately checked the banking application on her cell phone to confirm the information. The money had arrived in the agreed amount. Without wasting time, Clara signed the agreement document on the official seal that David had brought. She also signed a full power of attorney for David to handle the title transfer process at the land registry office tomorrow morning with Mr. Chen. After all the initial administrative matters were settled, Clara gave one very important special instruction to David. Clara asked David to inform Mr. Chen to take possession of the house immediately the next afternoon. Right after the final payment was made, Clara told David that there were still belongings of Michael and Eleanor inside the house. Clara gave full authority to Mr. Chen and the housing complex's security to evict anyone inside the house the next afternoon because the ownership had legally transferred. David noted the instruction carefully. David promised to accompany Mr. Chen to vacate the house according to Clara's request. The meeting that night was concluded in less than an hour. Clara shook David's hand and thanked him for his quick work. David excused himself to prepare the follow-up documents that needed to be completed the next day. Clara remained seated for a moment after David left the coffee shop. She picked up her cell phone and opened her contact list. She looked for the names Michael, Eleanor, and Jessica. One by one, Clara blocked their phone numbers from her contacts. She also blocked all of their social media accounts without exception. Clara didn't want to give them any way to contact her again. Clara left the coffee shop and got back into her car. She started the engine and drove towards the interstate highway. She planned to drive all night to a city on the other side of the state where she had once worked at the beginning of her career. A city far from the reach of Michael and his family. In the middle of the journey, Clara pulled over at a highway rest area. She turned off the engine and opened the window. The cold night air hit her face. Clara took out the SIM card from her cell phone. She broke the card into 2 pieces and threw it into a trash can near her parking spot. That act was the most tangible proof of cutting ties. Clara would never go back to Michael. She had secured her financial assets. She had canceled the event that was harming her. And tomorrow afternoon, Michael and Eleanor would face a very humiliating reality when they returned home to find they no longer had a place to live. Clara felt immense satisfaction. She closed the car window, started the engine, and continued her journey on the night highway towards a new life. The morning sun shone brightly, illuminating the city. At Eleanor's residence, the atmosphere was very busy and full of pride. Jessica had finished her makeup by a professional artist hired at great expense. She wore a pure white wedding gown adorned with sparkling crystal embellishments on the chest and sleeves. Eleanor stood behind Jessica, looking at her daughter's reflection in the large mirror. Eleanor smiled broadly and kept praising Jessica's beauty. She spoke in a loud voice that Kevin's family would surely be very impressed with the magnificent wedding party today. Eleanor was very confident this party would elevate their family's status in the eyes of Kevin's family, who came from a wealthy business background. In the living room, Michael sat on the sofa, constantly staring at his cell phone screen. Since last night, he had been trying to call Clara's number. He had also sent dozens of text messages. However, he received no reply. His calls always went straight to voicemail. Michael started to feel a little anxious, but he tried to dismiss the feeling. He convinced himself that Clara was just sulking and locking herself in her luxurious house. Michael considered Clara's anger a common occurrence that would subside on its own in a few days. Michael adjusted his formal suit and stood up when he saw Eleanor and Jessica coming out of the dressing room. The three of them walked out of the house to a rented luxury car waiting in the garage. A neatly dressed driver opened the door for them. Inside the car, Jessica couldn't stop taking pictures of herself with her cell phone. Eleanor sat next to her with her head held high, discussing the list of important guests who would be attending. Eleanor made sure with Michael that the high-class seafood catering was ready to be served in the afternoon. Michael nodded and replied confidently that everything was perfectly arranged. Michael was completely unaware that a major disaster was waiting for them at their destination. The journey to the event hall took about 30 minutes. The luxury car slowly entered the venue's parking area. Michael got out first and straightened his suit. But when he looked towards the main lobby of the building, his forehead furrowed sharply. He saw 3 large moving trucks parked right in front of the main entrance. A dozen workers in black uniforms were busy loading items from inside the building into the trucks. Michael walked quickly towards the lobby area to see what was happening. Eleanor and Jessica followed behind Michael with hurried steps. Upon arriving at the threshold of the main entrance, the sight inside the hall made them stop in their tracks. The 1,000-capacity event hall looked like a mess. The red carpet that was supposed to be rolled out from the entrance to the wedding stage was being rolled up by several workers. The arrangements of imported white lilies and pink roses that were neatly arranged last night were now piled roughly in large plastic baskets. Premium velvet guest chairs were being stacked on dollies to be taken out. The wedding stage, which was supposed to be the main focus, was partially dismantled, leaving only a bare metal frame and wooden planks. Jessica screamed at the top of her lungs seeing the condition. She ran into the hall without caring about her wedding dress sweeping the dirty floor. She approached a worker who was removing a decorative crystal wall lamp and told him to stop. Eleanor also ran in with her face flushed with anger. Eleanor shouted the name of the decoration manager and hurled harsh words at the workers. Eleanor accused the workers of going to the wrong venue or intending to steal their party props. The atmosphere inside the hall instantly became chaotic, with Eleanor's angry shouts and Jessica's hysterical cries. Mr. Sterling, the decoration vendor's manager, walked from the stage area towards Eleanor and Michael. Mr. Sterling's face was calm and flat. Eleanor immediately pointed at Mr. Sterling's face. She berated him and stated that her family had paid $50,000 for this luxurious decoration. She demanded that Mr. Juan Sterling reinstall all the decorations in less than an hour because the guests would be arriving soon. Michael stepped forward and puffed out his chest. He spoke in a threatening tone, saying that he was the bride's brother and he would report Mr. Sterling to the police on charges of fraud if this event was ruined. Mr. Sterling didn't back down an inch. Instead, he took out a clipboard with documents from his bag. He handed a piece of paper containing the proof of the contract agreement and the cancellation instruction to Michael. Mr. Sterling spoke with a firm and clear voice. He explained that the contract for the rental of property and decoration was made in Clara's name, not Michael's or Eleanor's. Mr. Sterling also showed the proof of the $50,000 payment transfer, which came purely from Clara's personal account. He emphasized that last night, Clara, as the official client, had given direct instructions to cancel the order and dismantle all decorations before the event started. Michael froze, his eyes reading the text on the paper over and over. The signature on it was indeed Clara's authentic signature. The facts stated by Mr. Sterling were a reality that could not be legally disputed. Clara was the legitimate client. Michael had no rights to the order. Eleanor snatched the paper from Michael's hand and read it herself. Eleanor's body immediately trembled violently. She looked at Michael with a demanding expression. She forced Michael to withdraw money from his own account that very moment to pay Mr. Sterling to have the decorations reinstalled. Michael swallowed hard. Cold sweat started to pour down his forehead. Michael opened his mouth to speak, but his voice was stuck in his throat. He didn't have $50,000. The balance in his personal bank account was no more than $200. All this time he had been lying to Eleanor, saying that he was covering all the expenses. In reality, Clara paid for everything. Amidst the panic, Jessica's cries grew louder. She sat crumpled on the dusty floor of the hall. Her makeup was smeared with tears. Time kept ticking, and Kevin's family would arrive at the location in 45 minutes to hold the wedding ceremony in a hall that was now completely empty without any decorations. The roar of the engines from Mr. Sterling's moving truck slowly faded and disappeared from the event hall's parking area. Mr. Sterling and all his workers had left, taking with them all the decorative property that had been unilaterally canceled by Clara. Now, only a chilling silence remained in the vast main hall. The walls of the building felt bare and very cold. The marble floor, which had been covered by a thick red carpet, was now dirty with the shoe prints of the loading and unloading workers who had been bustling about since dawn. Jessica was still sobbing on the dirty floor, clutching her luxurious wedding dress, which was now covered in dust stains. Eleanor paced back and forth with very quick steps. The middle-aged woman's face was red, holding back anger and a sense of shame that was beginning to spread throughout her body. Eleanor stopped her pacing right in front of Michael. She pointed at her son's face with a violently trembling index finger. Eleanor gave a very firm and non-negotiable command. She ordered Michael to immediately take his cell phone and find a replacement decoration vendor that very second. Eleanor demanded Michael to immediately transfer a deposit, whatever amount the new vendor requested, so that the hall would be presentable again for a wedding ceremony. Eleanor repeatedly reminded Michael in a high-pitched tone that Kevin's family entourage would arrive at the location in a matter of minutes. Michael stood rigidly in his place. Cold sweat poured down his forehead, soaking the collar of his white shirt. He swallowed repeatedly to relieve the dryness in his throat. He stared at his cell phone screen, which had been displaying a call failed status. Clara's phone number was completely inactive. Michael tried to dial Clara's number again with a trembling hand. The female operator's voice from the network system was heard again, informing him that the number was out of reach or intentionally turned off. Michael was truly at his wits' end. The savings balance in his personal account was only $200. That small amount wouldn't even be enough to rent 100 standard guest chairs. Eleanor snapped at Michael with a voice that echoed in the empty and quiet room. She asked loudly why Michael was just standing there silently, staring at his phone screen. Eleanor was very surprised because usually Michael was always quick to pull out cash or a credit card to indulge his family's requests. She continued to press and force Michael to immediately contact his business colleagues who owned wedding facility rental businesses. Before Michael could open his mouth to answer his mother's barrage of questions, the roar of engines from several luxury cars was clearly heard from the main entrance. The large entourage from Kevin's family had arrived at the location earlier than the time written on the invitation. Kevin walked in leading his family. He wore a bright silver, very elegant and expensive groom's suit. Behind Kevin walked his parents, who were dressed very neatly and wore sparkling gold jewelry. Kevin's core family, numbering around 30 people, followed behind them with faces full of happy smiles. Kevin's steps came to an abrupt halt right at the threshold of the main entrance. The happy smile on his face disappeared instantly, replaced by a look of great confusion. Kevin's father and mother also stopped and looked around the room with wide eyes. They saw a completely empty event hall. Not a single guest chair was arranged. There were no catering tables for the food. There was no wedding stage erected. Not a single decorative flower was attached to the walls. The room looked exactly like an empty, unkempt building that had its rental canceled. Kevin's father stepped forward, approaching Eleanor. His tone of voice was very heavy and demanding. He asked directly what the meaning of this empty scene was. He asked firmly where the luxurious decorations worth tens of thousands of dollars that Eleanor had always boasted about every time their families had a routine meeting were. Kevin's father also questioned why his future daughter-in-law was sitting crying on the floor with her wedding dress dirty. Eleanor forced a very stiff smile onto her lips. She tried to cover her immense panic with an excuse she made up on the spot. Eleanor told Kevin's father that there was a small technical problem with the decoration vendor's management. Eleanor guaranteed in a loud voice that all these problems would be resolved by Michael in a short time. She turned to Michael and gave him a very sharp and demanding look. She motioned for Michael to step forward immediately to explain to Kevin's family and simultaneously pull out the full payment in cash on the spot so that a replacement vendor could come and save the event. All eyes from the guests' entourage were now fixed sharply on Michael. Kevin stared at Michael with an angry and demanding look for certainty about his wedding. Kevin's father crossed his arms in front of his chest, waiting for a logical explanation to come out of Michael's mouth. Eleanor kept urging Michael from the side to speak up and show proof of his financial wealth in front of their in-laws. Michael realized he could no longer escape from today's reality. The defense of his great lie over the years had been completely shattered this morning. Michael dropped his cell phone onto the marble floor with a fairly loud thud. He looked at his mother's face with an empty and very resigned expression. Michael took a long breath and began to speak with a voice trembling with restrained tears. He confessed all his big secrets in front of everyone in that empty hall. Michael stated in a very blunt sentence that he had no money whatsoever to hire a new decoration vendor. Michael admitted openly that the entire cost of the venue rental, stage decoration, catering payment, and Jessica's wedding dress was paid in full using money from Clara's personal savings account. Michael looked directly into Eleanor's eyes and emphasized that he had been lying terribly for years of his married life. All the luxurious facilities their family enjoyed, including the rented luxury car and Eleanor's large monthly shopping allowance, came purely from Clara's salary and hard-earned savings. Michael admitted that he was just a low-level regular employee with a very small salary and many debt deductions. Michael also explained the exact reason why this wedding hall was empty. He recounted that the previous night he had sent a text message to Clara under direct orders from Eleanor. Michael explained that the text message contained a strict prohibition for Clara to attend this wedding, because Clara was only considered an outsider and not part of the core family. Michael told everyone that it was that insulting message that made Clara take firm and rational action. Clara had withdrawn all the operational funds she had paid. She officially canceled all vendor contracts, and now Clara had disappeared with all her assets without a trace. The reality that came out of Michael's mouth was a huge shock to Eleanor. Her body swayed backward from losing her balance. She had to hold on tightly to a concrete pillar to keep from fainting on the floor. The pride and arrogance she had always displayed to her neighbors and extended family were completely destroyed in a matter of seconds. She realized with belated regret that she had cast out the sole source of funding for her luxurious life. She had demeaned and thrown away the daughter-in-law who had been the financial backbone of their family. Kevin's family felt utterly deceived, disrespected, and insulted by the great lie of Michael's family. Kevin's father shook his head with a very condescending look. He stated in a loud voice that his family would not have a relationship with liars who turned out to be poor and had malicious intentions of extorting their own daughter-in-law's assets. Kevin looked at Jessica, who was still crying on the floor, with deep disappointment and disgust. Kevin took off his luxurious groom's suit and threw it right at Michael's face. He turned around and gave a firm command to all his family members to go home and leave the building that very second. The wedding was unilaterally and permanently canceled at that moment. Michael, Eleanor, and Jessica were left behind in the empty hall, bearing the shame and reputational ruin that could never be repaired. The roar of the luxury cars belonging to Kevin's family slowly faded from the event hall's parking lot. Their departure left a tormenting silence for the three people still standing frozen in the large room. Jessica cried her heart out, pounding her hands on the dirty marble floor. The wedding dress she wore now looked very dull and was covered in black dust stains from the building's floor. Michael could only stare blankly at the main exit. His body felt incredibly weak, drained of all energy. He realized that his entire life's charade had been shattered to pieces at this very moment. Eleanor sat on a plastic chair left behind by the decoration workers in a corner of the room. The old woman's face looked deathly pale. She clutched her chest, which felt tight from the immense weight of shame. Before they could recover from the shock of the wedding's cancellation by Kevin's party, a new problem descended upon the family. The clock on the wall above the main door already showed 10 a.m. This was the official arrival time for the general invited guests from Eleanor's side. Rows of cars and motorcycles began to fill the building's parking area in waves. The guests started getting out of their vehicles with cheerful faces and smiles. They wore their best formal wear and very neat party dresses. Most of them were distant relatives, neighbors from the same residential area, and members of Eleanor's social clubs. These guests arrived with high expectations of seeing the luxurious wedding party that Eleanor had been boasting about for the past few months. The first group of guests stepped through the main entrance of the event hall. The cheerful smiles on their faces faded instantly, replaced by very real expressions of confusion. Their eyes swept across the empty room. There was no reception desk at the front of the hall. There was no wedding music to welcome their arrival in the lobby. The thick red carpet was nowhere to be seen on the floor. The wedding stage was just a bare iron frame without a single flower decoration or grand chair. Worse, there were absolutely no catering tables or dessert stations available on the right and left sides of the room. The room contained only empty air and a dusty floor. The guests' gazes finally settled on the figure of Jessica crying on the floor in her dirty wedding dress, and Michael and Eleanor, who looked completely disheveled. A few ladies from the social clubs walked cautiously towards Eleanor. They asked directly what was actually happening here. They asked why the hall had no decorations at all, and why the groom's family was not seen at the event location. Eleanor struggled to stand, leaning on the back of the plastic chair. She forced a pale, fake smile onto her face. She tried to concoct a new lie with a voice that trembled violently. Eleanor said that there was a technical error from the building management that caused the event to be temporarily postponed. She also made an excuse that Kevin and his family were resting in a special committee room. Of course, the guests did not believe such a nonsensical reason. They had functioning eyes to see the real situation before them. There were no signs of technical repairs from the building management. Not a single event committee member was on duty at the location. Whispers began to spread among the crowd of guests, whose numbers continued to grow. The whispers grew louder and clearer in the ears of Michael's family. The neighbors started talking about Eleanor's arrogance, which turned out to be just empty talk. They openly speculated that Michael's family was actually deep in debt and had failed to pay the rental fees for the hall and all its facilities. Eleanor's pride was completely shattered by the condescending looks from hundreds of eyes now staring directly at her. Jessica, unable to bear the sharp whispers, finally exploded in anger. She stood up and screamed shrilly at the guests. Jessica told them all to leave the building at that very moment. She hurled high-pitched sentences and drove away the people who were supposed to be her guests of honor. Jessica's actions only made the situation worse and uncontrollable. The guests felt offended and angry at the disrespectful treatment from the bride. Some of Michael's distant relatives shook their heads with expressions full of disappointment. One by one, they turned and walked out of the hall without saying a word of farewell to Eleanor. Michael did nothing to calm his sister or apologize to the departing guests. He had lost all ability to think clearly at this point. His uncle and aunt from out of town approached him just before they too left the room. The uncle patted Michael's shoulder with considerable force. His uncle expressed his deep disappointment in Michael directly. He brought up Michael's words from last month, where he always claimed to be a successful businessman with a 6-figure monthly income. Now, his uncle saw clear proof that his nephew couldn't even provide a glass of mineral water for his guests. The reprimand from his own uncle was the final blow that destroyed the last remnants of Michael's pride. Half an hour later, a middle-aged man in a building management uniform approached the remaining members of Michael's family. The man spoke in a flat and very firm tone. He asked Michael and his family to vacate the event hall immediately. The man explained that without a guarantee from an event organizer or catering vendor, the building management had to close the room to protect the company's assets. The man also added the absolute information that the venue rental fee had been withdrawn by its legal payer the previous night. Therefore, Michael's family was considered an outside party with no rental rights whatsoever. The firm eviction was the closing act of all the humiliating events of that day. Michael helped his mother walk slowly. Jessica staggered, still crying in shame. The 3 family members who once flaunted a luxurious lifestyle now walked out of the hall with their heads bowed. They walked through the now empty parking lot. As all the guests had left, they got into the rented car with completely shattered spirits. The journey home felt very long and mentally torturous. They didn't realize that their return home would only lead them to a new, far more terrifying disaster. Clara had prepared a final blow that would take away the only shelter they had left. The rental car carrying Michael, Eleanor, and Jessica moved slowly through the city streets under the scorching afternoon sun. The air conditioning in the luxury car was completely unable to cool their shattered spirits. Jessica sat in the back seat with a vacant stare. Her tears had dried, leaving behind a trail of ruined makeup. She had removed the accessories from her expensive wedding dress because they felt heavy and suffocating. Eleanor sat next to Jessica, continuously massaging her temples. Occasionally, the middle-aged woman would groan softly, enduring an excruciatingly throbbing headache. Michael sat in the front passenger seat. His eyes stared blankly at the asphalt road ahead. None of them made a sound. They were too tired and too ashamed to talk about the horrifying events at the event hall earlier. Michael's mind kept spinning, searching for a way out of the financial crisis that now ensnared him. He thought about the rental bill for this luxury car that had to be paid later this afternoon. He also thought about how to face the questions from the neighbors if they found out Jessica's wedding was shamefully canceled. But of all these problems, the most terrifying thing for Michael was thinking about how he could contact Clara. He knew he had to find his wife to apologize and persuade her to come back. Michael was heavily dependent on Clara's income to finance his family's daily needs. The long journey finally ended when their rental car entered the elite residential complex where Michael's family lived. The driver stopped the car right in front of the tall iron gate that surrounded the luxurious house. Michael opened the car door with weary steps. He intended to unlock the gate's padlock so the car could enter the yard. But his steps halted when he saw the padlock was already open. The iron gate was slightly ajar. Michael pushed the iron gate wide open. The scene in the front yard made Michael's heart pound instantly. 2 large commercial vans were parked in the garage area of his house. 4 men in residential security uniforms stood guard at the main entrance. In the middle of them stood a man in a neat shirt holding a thick folder of documents. The man seemed to be giving instructions to some movers who were starting to enter the house. Eleanor and Jessica also got out of the rental car after seeing Michael standing frozen at the gate. Eleanor frowned, seeing the unexpected crowd at her house. The pain in her head was immediately replaced by a renewed, boiling anger. Eleanor strode forward, ahead of Michael. She walked quickly towards the man in the neat shirt. She yelled at the man in a loud voice, demanding to know what they were doing on her private property. The man in the neat shirt turned and looked at Eleanor with a calm face. He introduced himself as Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies was the legal representative and personal assistant of Mr. Chen. He explained in a firm and clear tone that the house and all its land assets had legally changed ownership. The buyer was Mr. Chen. The sale transaction was completed early this morning. The title deed name change process had also been legally processed through a trusted notary. Mr. Davies stated that he had a full mandate from the new owner to take over this building this very afternoon. Hearing Mr. Davies's explanation, Eleanor screamed loudly. She accused him of being a fraud. Eleanor pointed towards Michael and declared very loudly that this house was the fruit of her son's hard work. Eleanor insisted that Michael had never sold this house to anyone. Michael, hearing his mother's statement, could only hang his head. His body trembled, holding back an immense fear. Michael knew for sure that his great lie was about to explode and destroy his family for the second time on the same day. Mr. Davies was completely unfazed by Eleanor's angry shouts. He opened the document folder he was holding and took out a copy of the house title and the purchase and sale agreement. Mr. Davies presented the document right in front of Eleanor's face. He read aloud the name of the first legal owner of the house, which was clearly stated on the state's legal document. The name written there was Clara. Michael's name was not listed on any document. Mr. Davies also showed Clara's original signature on the release of property rights document that had just been signed the previous night. He explained that Clara, as the sole owner of this house, had the absolute right to sell her asset without needing permission from Michael, let alone from Eleanor. That reality hit Eleanor's ears like a hard blow. She snatched the paper from Mr. Davies's hand and read it herself. Eleanor's eyes widened upon seeing Clara's name listed as the sole owner. All this time, Michael had always assured her that the house title was in his name. Eleanor turned to Michael with a look demanding an explanation. Michael looked away, not daring to meet his mother's eyes. His silence was a definite answer for Eleanor, that her son had indeed been lying terribly for years. Mr. Davies took back the document from Eleanor's now trembling hand. He gave a final, non-negotiable instruction. He gave Michael's family exactly 1 hour to enter the house and pack their personal belongings. The only items allowed to be taken were clothing and identification documents. Mr. Davies emphasized that all household furniture, electronics, and valuable jewelry bought by Clara were now fully under the buyer's ownership rights. Security officers would supervise their movements inside the house to ensure they didn't take any forbidden items. If they didn't leave within 1 hour, security would forcibly remove them onto the street without any exceptions. Jessica cried and struggled upon hearing the eviction order. She couldn't believe her luxurious life could be destroyed so quickly. Eleanor collapsed onto the paving stones of the yard. Her frail body could no longer bear the successive shocks and shame. There was no trace of arrogance left on her face. Michael walked slowly past his mother, who was crying on the ground. He entered the house, which now felt very alien to him, with a tight security escort from behind. Every step Michael took inside the master bedroom felt incredibly heavy. He looked at the house walls, the expensive mattress, and the comfort that would soon be permanently gone from his life. A security officer stood at the doorway, watching sharply every item Michael put into his bag. He could only pack a few of his work shirts and his cheap long pants. He realized that his action of following Eleanor's selfishness to get rid of Clara was the most fatal mistake of his life. Clara had retaliated against their evil deed with a precise and devastating attack. She had utterly destroyed the entire charade of Michael's family, down to its very roots. No more luxurious house, no more monthly allowance, and no more respect from others for the family of liars. Michael placed the duffel bag full of his clothes on the rough concrete floor. The air inside the 10 by 12-foot motel room was incredibly hot and stuffy. There was no air conditioning at all. Only a small fan whirred loudly in the corner. The fan was powerless against the oppressive heat. That afternoon, Eleanor sat leaning against the brick wall, its paint peeling in many places. The middle-aged woman kept fanning her face roughly with a piece of scrap cardboard. Sweat soaked the simple dress she wore. Next to her, Jessica sat hugging her knees with a completely vacant expression. Jessica had refused to speak, eat, or drink since they were forcibly evicted from the luxurious house earlier that day. Eleanor began to speak, her voice a loud complaint. She complained about the blistering heat. She complained about the numerous mosquitoes biting her arms and legs. She demanded Michael find a much more decent place to live, today. Eleanor ordered Michael to rent a room in a star-rated hotel, at least for tonight, so she could sleep comfortably. Michael looked at his mother with immense frustration. He replied in a flat tone that the money in his account was only down to $200. Michael stressed that the money had to be used sparingly to feed the three of them for the next month. Hearing this stark reality, Eleanor flew into a rage. She pointed at Michael's face and blamed him for all these terrible events. She accused Michael of being an incompetent head of the household for letting his wife act so arbitrarily towards her husband's family. Michael retorted his mother's accusation with a fact that could no longer be denied. He reminded Eleanor loudly that the idea to forbid Clara from coming to the wedding was entirely her own. Michael repeated the fact that Eleanor was the one who forced him to send that eviction text to Clara last night. He stated that Eleanor's arrogant attitude was the primary cause of Clara suddenly withdrawing all her assets. Eleanor fell silent upon hearing Michael's rebuttal. Her face turned red with anger, but she couldn't deny the truth. Jessica, who had been quiet, suddenly burst into hysterical tears. She blamed both Michael and her mother for destroying her wedding day. She lamented her fate of being abandoned by Kevin in front of so many respectable guests. The fierce argument continued in the cramped motel room, causing some of the neighboring tenants to gather at their door to see the commotion. Michael couldn't stand the atmosphere in the room, filled with screams. He grabbed his wallet and walked out, leaving his mother, who was still ranting angrily. Michael walked down the narrow alleyway to the main road. The afternoon sun beat down on his body and face. He flagged down a passing city bus and got on. His destination was singular. He had to find Clara as soon as possible. He was certain Clara was still in the city. Michael planned to go to the office where Clara worked. He was determined to kneel and beg for Clara's forgiveness in front of her colleagues, hoping she would feel pity and take him back into a comfortable life. The bus ride took an hour. Michael got off in front of a magnificent high-rise office building. He hurried into the main lobby. He went straight to the receptionist's desk and asked for Clara's whereabouts, out of breath. The female receptionist asked Michael to wait and began checking employee data on her computer screen. A few minutes later, the receptionist provided information that made Michael's body go weak. She informed him that Clara had officially submitted her resignation letter this morning. All of Clara's administrative matters and severance pay had been settled quickly and in cash by the company's management at her special request. Clara had also asked the office security to pack her personal belongings and send them to a shipping agent's address this afternoon. Legally and administratively, Clara no longer had any ties to the company. Michael refused to believe the information. He demanded permission to go up to the floor where Clara's department was. The receptionist refused the request very firmly, because Michael did not have an access card and had no official appointment. Michael tried to force his way through the main entrance turnstile, but two large security guards immediately stopped him. The two officers grabbed his arms tightly and pushed him out of the building onto the street. Michael stood on the sidewalk in front of the building, feeling crushed. His first hope had completely failed. Clara had acted much smarter and faster than he had anticipated. Not giving up, Michael took his cell phone out of his pocket. He looked for Sarah's contact number. Sarah was Clara's best friend since college who used to visit their house. Michael immediately pressed the call button. The call connected quickly. Before Michael could even say hello, Sarah had already launched into a barrage of sharp words from the other end. Sarah stated loudly that she already knew about all the malicious treatment from Michael and Eleanor from Clara's story last night. She called Michael a man who only knew how to exploit his wife's assets and had no sense of gratitude. Sarah laughed at the destruction of Michael's social status and said that he deserved the commensurate punishment of poverty. Michael begged Sarah to tell him Clara's current address or at least her new phone number. Sarah answered very firmly that she would never reveal her friend's whereabouts to a wicked person. Sarah also issued a stern threat to report Michael to the police for privacy invasion if he dared to contact her again. The call was unilaterally disconnected by Sarah. Michael felt increasingly desperate and lost. He walked aimlessly along the side of the busy road filled with traffic. He then tried to contact some of Clara's distant relatives whose phone numbers he knew. He called Clara's aunt, who lived out of state. The result was very disappointing. Clara's aunt immediately hung up when she heard Michael's voice. He then tried to contact Clara's uncle. The uncle answered the phone. However, Clara's uncle instead cursed him with harsh words and told Michael to work hard instead of begging a woman. All doors to information about Clara's whereabouts were tightly shut and locked. Clara had completely erased all traces of her existence from Michael's life with meticulous care. Michael dragged himself to a city park. He sat on a hard concrete bench. He rubbed his face with his hands. Suddenly, his cell phone rang. It was a call from the car rental company. The rental agent was demanding payment for the luxury car used this morning, plus late return fees, with a total bill reaching $2,500. Michael turned off the phone with a trembling hand without answering. He only had $200 left in his wallet. He certainly wouldn't be able to pay that debt. He also had to keep thinking about the daily food expenses for his mother and Jessica, who continued to demand a comfortable life. Michael leaned his back against the park bench. He stared at the skyscrapers around him with a dazed look. An overwhelming sense of regret began to flood his mind. For 5 years of marriage, he had a wife who was very smart, financially independent, and incredibly patient in serving all his family's demands. Clara always financed all the huge household expenses. Clara always bought expensive clothes for Eleanor and Jessica so they could show off their fake wealth. However, Michael repaid all that extraordinary kindness with lie after lie. He continued to hide the truth of his wife's goodness to maintain his image in front of his parents. He allowed his mother to insult and belittle his wife every day in their home. Now, after Clara left with what was rightfully hers, Michael finally realized the bitter truth that he himself had no value. Without the financial support from Clara, Michael was just a poor man with many debts and the burden of a demanding family. Michael shed tears of regret in the silence of that park bench. He fully realized that his search would always be futile because he truly deserved to be left forever. The story's perspective now shifts entirely to Clara. The morning sun pierced through the windshield of the car Clara was driving. She had driven all night across the interstate. The exhaustion in her body was overcome by an immense sense of relief in her mind. Clara entered the downtown area of her new destination city. This city was very far from her old home with Michael. Clara had worked in this city for several years at the beginning of her career. She knew the ins and outs of this city very well. It gave her a feeling of security because she knew Michael didn't have the money or connections to track her this far. Clara stopped her car in the parking lot of a star-rated hotel with tight security. She got out of the car and brought her suitcase to the reception desk. Clara rented a suite for the next week. She needed a comfortable place to rest and plan her new life from scratch. After getting the room key, Clara went straight in and threw herself onto the soft bed. She turned on her new cell phone. She had bought a new number and a new device at a highway rest stop at dawn. Her old cell phone was permanently turned off and stored at the bottom of her suitcase. Clara opened the banking app on her new cell phone. Her eyes stared at the string of numbers on the screen with great satisfaction. The money from the sale of her luxurious house had been fully transferred from Mr. Chen. Combined with her severance pay from her job and her personal savings, the amount of money she had was enormous. She was now a very wealthy single woman. Clara smiled broadly, looking at the phone screen. For the past 5 years, she had worked herself sick just to finance the fake lifestyle of her husband's family. She bought designer bags for Eleanor. She paid Michael's credit card bills every month. She also funded all of Jessica's tertiary needs. Now, all the money from her hard work was absolutely her own. There were no more selfish people freeloading off her labor. 2 days later, Clara began to look for a permanent residence. She didn't want to buy a big house again, as it would take a long time to process the documents. Clara chose to rent a luxurious apartment unit on the 20th floor. The apartment had full facilities with very modern furniture. From her apartment window, Clara could see the view of the entire city. She paid the apartment rent in full for the next 2 years. Clara also started shopping for new clothes and daily necessities. She threw away everything that reminded her of her dark past. After settling her living arrangements, Clara began to focus on her business plan. She didn't want to go back to being a corporate employee. Clara decided to start her own business using the large capital she possessed. Armed with her experience as a project lead and her old connections in this city, Clara established a management consulting and business planning services firm. This business choice was perfect as she had a lot of expertise in managing budgets and operational schedules. Clara rented a strategic office space in the central business district. She recruited several young employees with high work enthusiasm. Clara was very firm in leading her company. She was hands-on in supervising every project undertaken by her team. Her employees respected her greatly because Clara was a fair boss who gave large bonuses to high achievers. In just 6 months, Clara's company already had 20 regular clients from various industrial sectors. Her company's revenues skyrocketed, exceeding the initial targets she had set. Clara opened a special savings account for long-term investment funds. She began to buy several property assets on the outskirts of the city as a form of security for her future. Months passed by very quickly. Clara's life changed drastically for the better. Her consulting business grew very rapidly. Many large companies in the city used Clara's services because her work was very thorough and satisfactory. Clara now had a net monthly income far greater than when she was still an employee. She was able to buy a new model luxury car in cash to support her image when meeting important clients. Besides financial success, the biggest change was visible in Clara's physical and mental condition. Clara changed her hairstyle to be shorter and more modern. Her appearance looked much fresher and more authoritative. The work clothes she wore were always dominated by elegant colors like black, white, and navy blue. Every step she took radiated a very strong sense of confidence. Gone was the Clara who always bowed her head when scolded by her mother-in-law. Gone was the obedient woman willing to go hungry to buy jewelry for her sister-in-law. Clara's face now always looked bright and radiant. Her body was healthier because she regularly exercised at her apartment's fitness center every morning. The heavy burden on her shoulders had been completely lifted. She no longer had to listen to insults and sharp sarcasm from Eleanor. She no longer had to deal with Michael's lies and manipulative nature. Clara truly enjoyed her freedom to the fullest. She often spent her weekends visiting fancy restaurants or having coffee at expensive cafes without having to worry about someone else's bill. She socialized with a new circle of friends filled with entrepreneurs and professionals. Her new friends greatly appreciated Clara's achievements and intelligence. They respected Clara as a strong and independent woman. Clara buried all the bad memories of her past deep down. For her, Michael, Eleanor, and Jessica were just part of a past mistake that she had permanently erased from the book of her life. One afternoon, Clara stood on her apartment balcony, holding a cup of warm tea. She watched the sun setting on the western horizon. The evening breeze gently blew her short hair. Her memory occasionally returned to the events of the night before Jessica's wedding. The text message from Michael kicking her out of the family event was the most valuable turning point in her life. Clara realized that sometimes, the deepest pain is the main driver for someone to rise up and make big decisions. If Michael had never sent that message, Clara might still be trapped in a miserable life. Clara smiled faintly, absorbing that reality. She had won a decisive victory against the people who belittled her. She lived very peacefully and prosperously in her new city. Meanwhile, her past was left far behind, with no intention of ever looking back. A year had passed since the storm of destruction hit Michael's family life. The wheel of fate had now turned completely, placing Michael and his family at the very bottom, in a very pathetic state. The luxurious house they once occupied was now just a torturous memory. Michael was forced to work odd jobs every day to make ends meet for the three of them. Sometimes he was a porter at the wholesale market, and sometimes he was a delivery driver for a very small and uncertain wage. Most of his hard-earned money was spent on paying the interest on the mounting debts from the car rental company and several banks. Debt collectors came in turns every week to their cramped rented house located in a squalid alley. Eleanor's condition also changed drastically. The old woman who was once so arrogant and fond of showing off fake wealth now often fell ill. She spent most of her time on a thin mattress on the floor of her room, constantly lamenting her bad luck and blaming the circumstances. Meanwhile, Jessica's fate was no less tragic. Kevin and his family officially divorced Jessica just a few months after the canceled wedding incident at the empty hall. Kevin's family felt completely deceived by the falsehood of Michael's family, who turned out to be poor and manipulative. Jessica was now a young divorcee suffering from severe depression, often screaming for no reason, and always locking herself in the dark rented room. On a very hot afternoon, Michael was resting at a small roadside diner after finishing hauling dozens of heavy sacks of rice. His clothes looked very shabby, covered in sweat stains and road dust. Michael's tired gaze unintentionally fell on a small old television that was on in the corner of the diner. The television was broadcasting a local business news program about the profile of an inspiring, successful entrepreneur. Michael's heart suddenly pounded very fast, and his breath seemed to stop when he saw the face of the woman who appeared on the screen. The woman being interviewed with great respect by the host was Clara, his ex-wife. Clara appeared stunning and classy. She wore a very elegant navy blue formal suit with a neat short haircut that radiated the aura of a very smart and authoritative career woman. The host mentioned that the management consulting firm founded by Clara had successfully won the highest award as the fastest-growing consulting firm and had dozens of large corporate clients. Clara smiled very sweetly and confidently at the camera as she explained the development of her business. Michael stared at the television screen without blinking. A mixture of longing, tightness, and deep regret churned in his chest. He saw the woman his mother used to insult now at the peak of incredible success, far surpassing him, who now lived below the poverty line. Michael's mind was immediately filled with a desperate, reckless plan. He thought that Clara's current financial success was a golden opportunity for him to escape his suffering. Michael thought that Clara might still have some leftover love or pity after 5 years of married life together. Michael decided to use all of his week's wages to buy a bus ticket to the city where Clara now lived. He left Eleanor and Jessica at the rented house without a word, all to chase after his ex-wife. Throughout the long night journey that took over a dozen hours, Michael kept rehearsing words of apology in his head. He planned to kneel before Clara, cry his eyes out, and promise to be an obedient husband and keep his mother away from their lives if Clara would take him back. Michael was very sure that his tears of regret would be able to soften the heart of a woman who was once known for her immense patience. Upon arriving in the destination city the next day, Michael immediately looked for the address of Clara's office building, which he had glimpsed on the television broadcast. The skyscraper stood majestically in a very luxurious business district, guarded tightly by security. Michael waited near the exit of the private parking area for several hours, his body exhausted and his clothes wrinkled. In the afternoon, a shiny black luxury sedan emerged from the parking area and was forced to stop near the outer gate because the traffic light turned red. Michael saw very clearly that Clara was sitting in the back seat of the car, reviewing some documents on her lap. Without wasting time, Michael ran quickly towards the luxury car. He knocked hard on the car window repeatedly while calling out Clara's name in a hoarse voice, holding back tears. Clara turned slowly and saw Michael's figure from behind her car window. She didn't look surprised at all. Her face remained absolutely calm. Clara gestured to her private driver to lower the car window a few inches. Michael immediately brought his face close to the window gap, tears starting to stream down his cheeks. He began to apologize for all his past mistakes, recounted the suffering of his current life, and asked Clara to be his wife again, so they could build a life together, like before. Michael thought Clara would scream in anger, curse him, or tell her driver to speed away down the street. However, Michael's guess was completely wrong, because the real plot twist was just beginning. Clara looked at Michael with a very graceful and victorious smile on her lips. Not a hint of hatred, revenge, or anger was visible on her beautiful face. Clara regarded Michael as nothing more than a stranger who had no influence on her life now. Clara spoke in a very soft but emphatic tone that crushed Michael's hopes. She said that she was very grateful for the eviction message Michael had sent a year ago, because without that cruel message, she would never have had the courage to leave and find true happiness. Clara then opened her luxurious handbag that was beside her. She took out a thick, gold-colored envelope with very luxurious and classy engraved motifs. Clara handed the envelope through the car window gap right into Michael's trembling, hungry hand. She asked Michael to open the envelope as a sign that her new life was proceeding perfectly. Michael accepted the golden envelope with his whole body shaking violently. He unfolded the thick paper inside with a pounding heart. His eyes widened and his body instantly became as stiff as a stone when he read the gold-inked writing on the premium white paper. The document was a very luxurious official wedding invitation. It clearly stated Clara's name, who would soon be marrying a distinguished man named James Preston. James was the wealthiest real estate tycoon in the city, a true gentleman who deeply respected, loved, and treated Clara with sincere and genuine honor. The grand wedding was scheduled to be held at the most magnificent five-star hotel in the city center in 1 month. Clara looked at Michael one last time with a look full of pity, gave a small, victorious smile, then pressed the button to raise the luxury car's window until it was sealed shut. Her private driver immediately stepped on the gas as the traffic light turned green, making the black sedan drive away slowly from the gate area and disappear into the bustling city streets. Michael stood frozen on the side of the road with tears streaming down his face even more heavily. The luxurious, gold-inked wedding invitation slipped from his limp grasp and fell onto the dirty asphalt, covered in vehicle dust. Michael finally collapsed to his knees on the edge of the sidewalk, clutching his chest, which felt incredibly tight and shattered into a million pieces. His last hope of being able to enjoy wealth and comfort again through Clara's assets had died completely that afternoon. He realized with a very belated sense of resignation that this was the absolute karma he had to bear for his past selfishness and lies. Michael staggered back towards the bus terminal to return to his hometown with a completely empty soul, ready to face the rest of his life filled with poverty, mounting debt, and a deep regret that would haunt him for the rest of his life, without end.